3 lives, 3 fates twisted into a tight knot of fateful coincidences. Michael Raines, a 38-year-old LAPD detective whose workaholism had reduced his marriage to a hollow shell. His wife, Sarah, a fragile 32-year-old who'd buried her dreams of a happy family under the weight of endless fertility treatments and lonely nights. And Jake "Ghost" Morrison, a former pro racer who found his adrenaline rush in a high-stakes game with the law. None of them could have guessed that a sweltering Tuesday in July in the LA suburbs would kick off a chain of events that would end with blood staining the scorching asphalt of a California freeway. Sarah was mechanically wiping down the glass shelves at her flower shop, Eden's Garden, when the bell above the entrance shattered the morning quiet. After yet another failed attempt to conceive, work had become her only solace. Here, among the blooms, she could, at least for a little while, forget about the emptiness in her and Michael's house. "Morning," a deep voice rumbled, making her turn around. "You got anything for a guy who's tired of playing by the rules?" A tall, dark-haired man in a worn leather jacket stood in the doorway, casually holding a motorcycle helmet. His hair was windblown, and there was a mischievous glint in his hazel eyes. He radiated danger and freedom, everything she was so desperately missing in her life. "Depends on how far you're willing to bend them," Sarah surprised herself with her own boldness. Something about this stranger stirred a long-dormant sense of adventure within her. "Oh, I stopped seeing lines a long time ago." He moved closer to the counter, and she caught a whiff of leather, gasoline, and something inexplicably alluring. "Jake Morrison, ex-pro racer. Now, let's just say I'm a freelancer in the expedited delivery business. Sarah Raines," she hesitated before adding, "owner of this little slice of paradise." "Raines?" He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Like Detective Michael Raines?" Sarah tensed up. "You know my husband? Let's just say our paths might have crossed." Jake ran a finger along the petal of a black rose. "Though I prefer they didn't. You know, my line of work has its complications." Meanwhile, back at the LAPD precinct, Michael Raines was hunched over a map of the city, riddled with red flags. Each mark represented a sighting of the elusive courier for the Espinosa cartel. Captain Rodriguez stood beside him, drumming his fingers on the desk. 6 months, Mike. 6 months this SOB's been running circles around us." The captain shook his head. "The feds are breathing down our necks, the cartel's upping their shipments, and we don't even have a decent mugshot." "He's a pro, Cap." Michael rubbed his bloodshot eyes. "Ex-racer, if the informants are to be believed. Knows the city like the back of his hand and feels that bike like it's an extension of himself. You talk about him with such admiration. It's like you're sweet on him." The captain smirked. "I admire his skill," Michael frowned. "But he'll screw up eventually. They all do." Back at the flower shop, the conversation was taking an unexpected turn. "What about you, Mrs. Raines?" Jake studied her with undisguised interest. "You strike me as a woman who's got a wild hair up her butt to run." "You're mistaken?" Sarah turned to the display window, trying to mask her sudden agitation. "I'm perfectly happy with my life." "Really?" He moved in close. "Then why do your eyes tell a different story? They're so full of longing. A guy could drown in 'em." "You're awfully presumptuous, Mr. Morrison." She tried to sound cold, but her voice wavered betrayingly. "And you've been playing the part of the dutiful wife for way too long." His whisper grazed her ear. "You know what I see when I look at you? A woman suffocating in a gilded cage, who wakes up every morning thinking, 'Is this all there is?' Who dreams of something more than just existing." "You don't know anything about me?" Sarah spun around, face to face with him. "I know enough." His eyes were mesmerizing. I know you're tired of being alone in your own marriage. That the last time you felt truly alive was so long ago you can't even remember. That every time you hear a motorcycle revving on the street, you imagine another life. A life that's bright, dangerous, real. Sarah felt the sting of tears welling up in her eyes. Why are you doing this? Because I see a kindred spirit in you. He gently touched her cheek. Just as broken, just as searching. Let me show you another world. Just one night. What do you have to lose? Everything, Sarah thought. I could lose everything. 7 o'clock tonight after closing, she said instead. And I'm gonna need a helmet. Jake grinned, predatory and magnetic. I'll bring 2 bouquets. One for your shop. He paused. And one for the woman who's starting a new life tonight. As he left, Sarah stood by the window for a long time, watching the black Kawasaki Ninja disappear into the traffic. She didn't know that 15 minutes later, her husband would receive another alert about the ghost's presence in the city. She didn't know that this day would mark the beginning of the end. She didn't know that her longing for freedom would turn into a deadly trap. And back at the precinct, Michael Rains was placing a new red flag on the map, completely unaware that the man he'd sworn to catch had just stolen his wife's heart. Fate was setting the pieces on the board, preparing to play a game where there would be no winners. 3 months can change everything. 90 days, 2,160 hours, enough time to turn a chance encounter into an obsession and loyalty into betrayal. Los Angeles was melting under the August sun, but the real heat was just starting to build in the hearts of those who fate brought together in a deadly dance of love and revenge. In a small, dingy apartment on the outskirts of the city, a clock ticked. Every tick counted down to a catastrophe that none of the participants in this drama yet suspected. Sarah stood by the window, watching the setting sun paint the skyscrapers blood red. Things are dicier than usual today. She turned to Jake, who was checking his motorcycle gear. Michael's got 4 strike teams out there. I've never seen him this driven. Jake paused, looking intently at his lover. Are you worried about your husband? Or about me? Both of you? Sarah came closer, running her hand along his cheek, covered in stubble. Every time you get on that damn bike, I don't know if I'll see you again. And every time I look into Michael's eyes, she trailed off. Go on. Jake took her hands in his. What do you see in his eyes? Emptiness. Her voice cracked. You know, there used to be so much passion, so much life. We dreamed about kids, about a house with a white picket fence. She laughed bitterly. And then came the endless fertility treatments, the disappointments, the doctor's appointments. Michael retreated more and more into his work, and I became something like furniture to him. Pretty, comfortable, but lifeless. At the police station, Michael Rains sat at his desk, staring at a photo taken 5 years ago. Their honeymoon with Sarah, her happy smile, his enamored look. When did things go wrong? Chief, Lieutenant Rodriguez knocked on the office door. We have a problem with the operation. The 3rd month in a row all our plans are failing. Like this bastard is reading our minds. Michael slowly put the photo in his desk drawer. 3 months, you say? Well, right? He began to sort out the events in his memory. That's when Sarah started showing such an interest in my work. Honey, how was your day? Tell me about this case with the motorcyclist. How is the investigation progressing? You think we have a mole? Rodriguez frowned. I think a snake has started in my house. Michael opened the database. Check this phone number. In the apartment, Jake was already zipping up his jacket when Sarah suddenly hugged him from behind. Remember our first time? That night after the store closed. How can I forget? He smiled, turning to her. You were sitting behind me on the bike, hugging me tightly around the waist. We were driving along the empty highway, and you were shouting with delight. And then for the first time in many years I felt alive, she finished for him. You know, I've been the right girl all my life. I did what was expected of me. Married a promising policeman, opened this damn flower shop, tried to be the perfect wife. Sarah shook her head. And you came along and ruined it all with one smile. Sarah. Jake took her face in his hands. I'm an ex-racer who got involved with a drug cartel. I can't give you the life you deserve. What if I don't want that life? She looked him straight in the eyes. What if I finally realized what I really want? I filed for divorce, Jake. Yesterday. He recoiled as if she had hit him. What did you do? What I should have done a long time ago. Her voice grew stronger. I can't live a lie anymore. I can't wake up every morning next to the man who is hunting you. I can't pretend that my marriage didn't die many years ago. At the police station, Michael was looking at the computer screen, where the data for the verified number was displayed. A rented apartment rented under a false name, and his wife's phone in the contacts column. Boss. Rodriguez looked anxiously at the pale face of the chief. Cancel the operation. Michael's voice was calm. Too calm. I have a better idea. Remember those guys from the Rodriguez cartel? Who have wanted to get rid of a competitor for a long time. Mike, what are you planning? Justice. He took out his phone. Just justice. In the apartment, Jake was already getting on his motorcycle when Sarah kissed him for the last time. Be careful. They will be waiting for you at the Eastern Terminal. I'm always careful. He smiled that smile that once turned her world upside down. And when I get back, we'll talk about our future. A real future, without lies and masks. He didn't know that at that moment Michael Rains was already dialing the number of a person from the competitor cartel. I have information about the ghost, he said into the phone, and I know how to get him, along with his accomplice. Detective Michael Rains' plan of revenge was simple and brutal. Convinced that his wife Sarah was leaking information to Ghost, he decided to use her betrayal against them both. Instead of trying to arrest the elusive courier, Michael came up with another way. Let him be eliminated by competitors from the Rodriguez gang. You know, Captain. Michael stood by the map in his office. His voice sounded unusually hollow. It's funny how blindness can last 15 years. 15 damn years I didn't see the traitor in my own house. What are you talking about, Michael? The fact that my dear wife turned out to be very informed, and today her awareness will play into our hands. At the police station, Michael deliberately allowed his wife to hear false information about a planned ambush on the main route. As he expected, Sarah immediately contacted her lover, warning him of the danger and suggesting a safe route through the industrial zone. At the same time, Michael had already agreed with Rodriguez's people. They would be waiting for Ghost there. Honey, Sarah tried to make her voice sound normal. Are you late today? Big operation. Michael didn't even look up from the papers. Ambush on the main route. Oh, I hope everything goes well. She squeezed the phone in her pocket, already mentally typing a message to Jake. Everything went according to plan. Sarah passed the information to Jake, begging him to take a detour through the industrial zone. However, the former racer, looking at the message from his lover, felt his professional instinct sounding the alarm. Everything is too smooth with this detour, he muttered, stroking the steering wheel of his Kawasaki. 15 years on the track taught me one thing. When everything is perfect, expect a trick. At the last moment, without warning Sarah, he decided to take the main route. Sarah, unaware of the change in his plans, rushed onto the safe road. Her gray Audi was rushing through the deserted streets of the industrial zone, and in the rearview mirror there were flashing headlights of pursuers, which she, absorbed in anxiety for her beloved, did not even notice. "Please be there," she whispered, peering into the darkness. "Please be safe." At this time, Michael was with the assault group on the main route. "Sir, are you sure he's going to take a detour?" The young officer nervously fidgeted with the radio. "Absolutely," Michael smiled coldly. "My wife is very persuasive in her warnings." Suddenly, an excited voice came over the police radio. "Shooting on a parallel track. Gray Audi under fire. Do not interfere." Michael cut off, but something wavered in his voice, and then a black silhouette of a motorcycle appeared in the headlights. Ghost was flying straight towards them, as if mocking all the plans of revenge. Events unfolded rapidly. The special operation was successful. Jake didn't even try to resist. But when Michael was handcuffing, the radio blurted out, "Detour, Gray Audi. Driver shows no vital signs. Woman, 32 years old. Sarah." Jake raised his head, his face distorted with horror. "She went there." "Shut up," Michael hissed, but his fingers gripping the handcuffs visibly trembled. "You." Jake looked at him with wide, comprehending eyes. "You set it up. You knew. I wanted to kill you." Michael's voice was lifeless. "Not her." In the pocket of the murdered Sarah, a phone was found with an unfinished message, "I love you." She didn't have time to finish her last words, just as she didn't have time to start a new life that she dreamed of so much. "You know what's the worst thing?" Jake sat handcuffed on the cold asphalt. "She said she felt alive for the first time, that she was ready to start all over again. And now she will never start again." Michael looked into the night sky, and for the first time in 15 years of service, his cheeks were wet with tears. "None of us will start."